Hello, everybody, and very special day for me today. I am here with one of my favorite authors. I really love this book. I love the message of this book. Elaine Pofeldt, welcome to Feisworld Media on our podcast.
Thank you so much, Faye. I am so excited to be here.
And look at this book. I caught my eyes and I couldn't believe it was kind of serendipity, really, that I learned about this book. And at the same time, you reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I was like, what is happening? It's called the $1 million one person business. Make great money, work the way you like, and work the way you like, have the life you want. And this book was published in 2018. I think we're here for a special treat because Elaine has done so much more work, more interviews, and just more content in the process of updating the book. So, Elaine, please tell us about that.
Oh, sure. Well, the book is going into paperback in January, Faye. And so we've been updating the book, which has meant going back to all of the people in the book and seeing what they're up to. One really exciting thing happened this year. The Census Bureau came out with new numbers, which are 2 years older, of course. I mean, 2 years newer than the ones in the book. And the number of $1 million one-person businesses continued to go up in 2018, the most recent year, because there's always a 2-year lag. For the first time, it broke 40,000, which is a needle in a haystack. These are the Olympic athletes of the one-person business,
Wow.
but it's doubled since 2011 in just that short a time. And what I think has really been propelling the trend is technologies keep getting more and more inexpensive and accessible. We're all becoming efficiency experts
Hmm.
and becoming so smart about outsourcing, using contractors, doing the things that the people in this book do to extend what one person can do in a business. There's a lot of people that are just becoming very proficient in things like e-commerce. So even if that's not their main business,
Hmm.
they have adjuncts to their business that give them income diversity, which helps you to build a more sustainable business. And certain things that I wrote about in the book have only grown, like manufacturing. Years ago, you'd have never heard of a one person manufacturing business, but now there are more and more people in food businesses who are using co-packers. There are people who are making products, like maybe they start out with a little Etsy store, like one I wrote about for Forbes. They're called Nomad Lane,
Hmm.
and they were two people that wanted to become corporate refugees but hadn't become them yet, and then tested out some products on Etsy. And this one travel bag took off, and then they extended that idea, and now they have this under the seat tote, which obviously people aren't traveling as much right now, but right before the whole COVID crisis struck, they became $1 million one person business. They're New Yorkers, but they're living in Bali, which is really nice, right?
Wow.
So it's been really it's been very interesting and educational just to see how the businesses evolve. Some of them are no longer one person businesses, by the way. I don't view running a non-employer firm with no payroll as a religion that you have to adhere to for your whole life,
Hmm.
but I feel like they're a global resource that just gets not enough attention.
Hmm.
And if we gave them even more love as a society, they can do great things, whether as a great boutique business or as a business that will become an employer. Some of them now are at the point, one of them was Brooklyn, and I think they had raised $50 million in venture capital. They morphed from a husband and wife team into a traditional startup. But
Hmm.
the beauty of running a good one person business is you have options as opposed to scrambling from project to project. Then you're kind of in survival mode and you can't really be an entrepreneur of your own business and your own life.
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a good, I think, in summary of some of the folks that you spoke with, and I love how this book is combining not just theory and practical advices, but also real people. And the thing is, a lot of people don't realize is there are a lot of names you never heard of. And right, like these are people that are very relatable. And also, there's a section, it's called, what can you do to, like, what are some of the ideas that you can start with. And I went right to that section, actually,
Oh,
just
that's
to
good to
see.
hear. Well, everybody has hidden gifts that could be made into a business. The challenge is really thinking about, do you want to actually sell certain things? Like
Mm-hmm.
you could love doing fine arts painting and not want to sell your painting just because you do it for the love of it. So it's finding that place in your life where you actually want to commercialize something.
Mm-hmm.
And that could take a whole survey. I have some exercises in the book. I was actually just looking back at them, and basically it's a quiz for yourself as to, what are the things that other people find interesting about you? What do they ask you to help them with?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you totally geek out, right? Because we all have these subjects that we read so much about, and we'll listen to
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, and no one else in our life is really that interested in them, but we could talk about it for 6 hours. That
Right.
might be something that could be made into a business, because if you think about something a lot, or it could even be in your own career, maybe you have a corporate job and you think 24/7 about something that you work on, you have a dialogue going in your brain all the time about that subject, and you're always trying to solve problems, and you have such a deep perspective that
Mm-hmm.
you could do something that no one else can in terms of coming up with a business. And it doesn't take many resources. Some of these businesses started for like $100, and some of them took more. The manufacturing businesses usually take more because you need inventory,
Mm-hmm.
but most of the other ones don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just test it out, get up and running quickly, and see if you like it. And if it wasn't exactly right, there's so many other things you can try.
Yeah, exactly. So one advice I got from my friend Josh Green, who's Australian, when I left my corporate job, and he said, "Hey, Faye, give it a shot because not everything has to work." The not everything has to work part was so liberating that we often think that once we commit ourselves to something, sometimes even a few hours to a few days, we're like, this has to work, right? And I think especially, I know you have children as well. I don't, but even for me to look at, oh, this is something that I devoted my time to. I could have done something else. Like this better work. People better like it. I better be proud of it. I think we need to take ourselves away from that, especially during the initial experimentation phase, and to cut ourselves some slack, right? Not everything you do at work has to work. So definitely experiment. And that's the message I got from your book as well. And also the clearly calling out, just because you become $1 million one day, but you have to hit your six figure first. I love that message. Like get your $100,000 first and see how you can scale from there as a reminder.
Oh, yeah, you can definitely amplify. Once you get the formula right, you can always put Facebook ads against it or other things to amplify what you're doing right. But you do have to experiment. It doesn't cost that much money either. One example I liked is Laszlo Nadler, who started Tools for Wisdom Planners. He was a project manager, so he's good at time management. He likes that subject. And he designed these paper to-do books, but they weren't a to-do list. It was more of how do you move towards your life's biggest goal. He's into personal development and that sort of thing. And he tested it by putting up some early versions that he developed on Amazon. And then he saw what stuck and where he got feedback. And then in response to reader feedback, he kept perfecting it.
Mm-hmm.
And he also built a good clientele that way because they saw he was responsive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how he did it without spending a ton of money. He used print on demand. Another one of the entrepreneurs who I've written about for Forbes, Jason Vandergreen, he does a CAD engineering design company that has contractors all over the world. He's $1 million one-man business still. What he does because he gets a lot of ideas. I think a lot of entrepreneurial people are a little ADD. I'm not saying he has ADD, but just have ideas spinning all the time.
Yeah.
And so he tests them out he'll get a $30 website on GoDaddy for 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
He creates some sort of a mock-up or prototype, gets Facebook ads and drives them against the website to see if people come and buy. And if he gets no orders, then he just ends it after 30 days. So that way he doesn't put a ton of money into something. He had learned the hard way because he developed an app and he spent over $25,000 on it. Then it turned out there was a fatal flaw in terms of not understanding something about the competitive space, and he had to scrap it. So he learned how to do it more inexpensively and at very low risk. So even though they're risk takers,
they're
kind of risk minimizers too. And that's a powerful lesson. And it's something where I think if you've had a corporate background, two things that you said that's kind of stuck with me. you are allowed to experiment, but you really don't go in and just wing it, right? I can't imagine all the years I was in corporate coming in and not being prepared for a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't do it because you'll fall flat on your face. It's not an environment that supports that.
Yeah, yeah.
And they tend to like you to do things that have a bigger budget, right? Because it's scalable. So you don't really have that room for the small experiments sometimes that lead up to the bigger things. It's almost like you've got to have tested it before you even pitch it. And
Yeah.
it's hard to do the kind of things that you can do in a one-person business, which is why it's such a creative thing and why I think it attracts so many people who are a hybrid of having business savvy, but also are just very creative people.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think as a just reminder for people who are listening and watching, there is the majority of my audience right now are creative slash fitness entrepreneurs. The fitness part is new, but it's growing very strong because of the pandemic. And speaking, I'm going to get to how I experimented with that group of folks in a bit. But originally, all these creative entrepreneurs are focusing on content creation, whether you are writing a book, a blogging, or a lot of podcasters and more recently YouTubers. I think just like your friend who experimented something with 30 days, whether it's a landing page, for us is about writing consistently and putting content out there and then listen to the conversations. Actually reading and replying to the comments was such a huge part of it because as when I've never been tested for ADD. I wouldn't be surprised if I do. Definitely, on some sort of a spectrum here, because I'm bombarding myself with ideas day in and day out. It's nonstop. So
occupational hazard, I think I might be too. I don't know.
So we're so excited. I think especially as entrepreneurs, in particular creative entrepreneurs, you have all these ideas floating like 3 a.m. You get up, it's like, I gotta do this right now. I gotta be ahead of the herd. And it's so exciting, but you could use your platform no matter how small, social media or your website or YouTube. YouTube is super powerful these days because it's the second largest search engine in the world. And for me to test out content as I'm pivoting right now to live streaming and multi-streaming, like what we're using, I'm teaching people how to do this, how to set up using Zoom, because most people are really familiar with Zoom. So I figure we should try this instead of OBS. And then I look at that people actually want to learn. Oh, okay, so that's an idea I can build on. I can build a course. I can at least put together an ebook, a checklist of things, helping people, like you said, preparing for a meeting. We're preparing for a live stream session. People eat that up. People love, sort of assets and kind of tools like that.
Oh, it's amazing. And content creators are pretty well represented in the book in terms of the different categories. I tried to cover a broad spectrum of industries, but a few examples come to mind. Sol Orwell, he started examine.com. And he's somebody who he was getting into weight loss, and he started reading a lot about nutrition. He realized there weren't a lot of credible reports out there on what the different supplements and vitamins did. So he came up with an idea to hire PhDs who had studied this to write reports that he would then sell. Now the business has evolved over time because he was sending out more like PDF reports and that sort of thing. Now he's created an online subscription service where every month you pay $5 to get the latest nutritional information written by the same team of people who are an extended group of contractors and freelancers. But he's basically a content creator. Another person, Megan Telpner, in the book, she was just on another webinar with me just now. She's a nutritionist, but she's a really great writer. She had worked in advertising before, and she created MeganTelpner.com, which is a website where she blogs about different things she's passionate about with health and wellness. And then she started selling products. One was a PDF version of one of her courses. It was called the 3-Day Green Smoothie Fast, right? That sounds really healthy. And she sold it was like 11 years ago. So she sold it by email to like just the people in her email list.
Yeah.
And then she started marketing more of those types of things when it sold. I think she said she sold the original for $10. So don't be afraid to start small. And then this eventually morphed into online courses. And then that morphed into the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, which is
I saw that.
school, which then became the $1 million engine for the business. These things don't always happen overnight. I have had some people with e-commerce businesses where it's a little easier to amplify what you're doing, right? You have a good product, then you just do a lot of advertising against it. That's pretty quick. But if you're doing a content related business, you've got to kind of figure out what people are interested in. You find out what goes viral. Things can change over time. So it's more, I think, of a building process. She also wrote, for instance, a couple of cookbooks, which added to her brand. But this doesn't happen in 1 year, writing 2 cookbooks, forming a cooking school. She was patient, but now the business is pretty stable. She had a baby 3 years ago, and she's been able to cut back on her hours, but it's still maintaining at that level, which inspires me.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of this building block that people don't always see what's happening behind the scenes, which is, people start with that email list, something that they sell for $5, $10, not what we always see for those $2,000, follow this formula guarantee, gonna work on Instagram or, grow your following. I think the reality is a lot of these entrepreneurs, especially the ones I interview on my podcast for years, is they have to experiment, they have to fail, they learn from their failure, then they build, 20, 30 lead gen, so lead magnets to build up their audience. And most people think that all they see is that one. It's like, how do I get to that one thing? How do I get to that video that's going to go viral, that one blog article? And the reality is you got to keep opening doors. You got to just keep knocking on doors, and hopefully one day it will open. But the problem is, if you don't knock, you don't create content, you don't keep up with your research, your experimentation, then nothing is going to open because there's so much competition. Why should they come to you? All right. So I think we need to just prepare ourselves, like kind of change our mindset to think about that a little bit differently these days, that you have to be in it to win it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much discipline and consistent effort that goes into every single one of these businesses. There's an artist in New York, Iris Scott, who I've written about for Forbes, $1 million one-person business.
Yeah.
She went to art school. She does finger painting. She's you know her work?
Yeah, I know her work. And then it's funny that Tim Hopper, who is the senior executive at Holbein, the watercolor company, had that they have a professional relationship. So he introduced me to her work. I've been looking at it ever since. It's just so fascinating. Is she in your book too, possibly? Or just...
She's in I met her after I wrote the book, but I've been covering her a few times, and she's spoken at some of the events that I do. And what she talked about was she went to art school and was told, you have to price your stuff really high or it will kind of lose its snob appeal, I guess.
Yeah.
And only be in conventional galleries. And she's like, I don't really agree with that. So she started selling. She did have galleries, and she is reviewed in art magazine. She's a serious fine artist. She also sold the paintings on Facebook for $50 because she believed that everybody should be able to afford art. And then what happened was she would sell out. She'd post on Facebook that it had sold out.
Yeah.
And then she gradually raised the prices. Well, now some of her works go for $45,000.
Yeah. Yep. Iris Scott. Yep.
But she just did her own thing. She didn't care what other people said about pricing. She wasn't afraid to experiment and just put herself out there. She didn't think it was going to devalue her work. So I even encourage people to do things for free sometimes, to just pilot something and figure out if it will work, so that you go in when you're ready to charge for it. You feel confident that you're offering something great, because word of mouth is so important. Once people love something, you don't have to do that much marketing, especially if you're doing creative and professional services types of businesses. Those are actually in the 2018 data. That was the biggest category. 1/4 of the ones that got to 1 million in revenue were in professional services, which kind of counteracts the whole myth that you can't get to 1 million in a service business.
Right.
But the people that are doing it are using very unusual models. Like I have one case study who will be in the new book. Steve Ferreira is an auditor. He audits ocean shipping bills. It's a very niche industry, right? He's been in it for years. He knows it inside out. And basically, if say JCPenney's orders 50,000 shirts, they come over on a ship, and on the bill of lading, the bill for the shipment, there's a $250,000 mistake. He finds it. it's a public document. He can get it on this site called Panjiva, goes to JCPenney and says, I discovered a $250,000 mistake. I will tell you what it is and collect it, but you have to pay me a 50% commission,
Yeah,
right? Giving them money, they don't have to spend anything. So
yeah,
of course they say yes. So he's almost at 2 million. He's doing really great with that business. But if he had charged by the hour, think
yeah.
about that. He's
Mhm.
charging based on the value of what he's providing. Another entrepreneur who was a mid six-figure business told me he recently became $1 million one-person business. Jamie J. He's a podcast agency. He does custom podcasts, and he has his own podcast too. And he was kind of evolving the business model, but what pushed him over the edge were several things. One was he created a package where everybody who used the agency would have a single point of contact. It was a team of specially trained virtual assistants
Mhm.
who would, that point of contact, if the person, say you needed an icon to promote this podcast on
Yeah.
social media, the single point of contact would go to the graphic designer and have that made and make sure that before it was given to you, it was a good quality
Mhm.
icon. And they sort of run interference with the whole team. So the customers pay a flat fee, but it wasn't just that. They excelled at it. So his Google rankings came up for the agency. When there were ratings of podcast agencies, he kept getting really high ratings.
Mhm.
So then people organically started coming to him. And interestingly, they were more profitable clients than the ones he was getting from referrals from satisfied customers, which is very counterintuitive and interesting, but it's a lot of things happening at the same time.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's basically going back to what you were saying. It's a commitment to excellence and experimenting and getting it right. And then once you get it right, it totally changes everything. And
Yeah.
another model I just want to mention for the people who are in the service businesses is if you're really good at something and you've got it nailed, you can also just charge a very high hourly rate.
Mhm.
There's one where even bring in a bunch of people that do and use their services as contractors. And that's what Chad Patchke did. He's a specialized oil and gas industry consultant. He helps refineries basically not blow up, right? He finds the fire hazards and things like that.
Mhm.
So what he did was he had a lot of fellows that he knew from his work in corporate America who were around 60 years old and up and were kind of interested in stepping back from work a little bit, but still wanted to keep their hand in it. And he bills them out. Well, it's a very important service. So the companies that don't want to have an explosion don't mind if they're paying somebody like $200 an hour or $300 an hour. His best paid consultant, I think, is $350 an hour and is 75 years old.
That's amazing.
Right. So like all the
Value
okay
based.
boomer stuff, well, you know what? They're very valuable. The people that have a lot of experience because they know what they're doing.
Mhm.
And so I encourage people to really think about the value you're providing, right? If the refinery does not blow up,
Mhm.
that's worth a lot.
Yeah, supply demand really is such a part of this equation that for me recently that I realized that I raised my price a couple of times in the past year because you set your price, you set something up. When I first started consulting was 125, and to me back then it just seemed like a lot of money. And I knew I was charging more than, some of the other people I used to work with and I was coaching to become freelancers. And then over time, you have to ask, be reasonable, ask. And now in consulting and running my business on my own, I look at realistically how much time I have. I mean, we're still talking about primarily, hourly based rate. I realize I don't have that much time in my day. I have enough clients, so naturally I'm going to raise my rate. And to your point, a lot of people, talk about in this book, they're operating at another level, which is it's no longer looking at, hey, this guy that you mentioned could be looking at finding a mistake. The mistake is worth $500,000 or, $250,000. How could anybody do a piece of work for under a day, half a day, to be getting paid, $250,000 for, let's just say? Well, it's possible when you look at it from a value-based perspective. So that is such a drastic mind shift. And I also love the fact that we talk about courses a lot, but there are also scalable income that I look at these multiple streams of incomes that you talk about in this book, things such as, designing courses that you're done, you sell the courses for, many people do $500 to $1,000. Rami Sethi said he went out for hiking, came home, was $86,000 sitting in his bank account.
That's nice.
Yeah, he actually wrote, it's all true, and he can prove to you, he can, like, all the data, right? He ran a pre-recorded webinar when he went hiking. At the end of the webinar, for a lot of people, like, we all know that they have a product you're not obligated to buy. After you watch a 1 hour long free webinar, if you think there's enough value, well, he has definitely a solid, we're talking about like over 100,000 people audience. So even if a tiny little fraction of the people who pay, well, that's a lot of money. So those are scalable income. And what I've also learned from the examples you shared is ebooks and courses, but there are also a ton of affiliate marketing income as well, which I've learned just this year of, teaching people how to use Zoom and the lighting kit like the one behind me. I want to sell, definitely recommend Logitech, but there's nowhere to be found. Certain products, given the pandemic, are just not there. But, last month alone, Amazon sent me a check of $300. And Amazon historically pays very little amount of money. Okay, we're talking about like 2% with the price cut. And then different companies that would also, compensate me for a small percentage that's at zero extra cost for the customers who purchase the product. Just such an interesting learning process all around.
Oh, it's fascinating. I mean, it's constantly changing too,
Mm-hmm.
but especially in the pandemic, I think it's really important to have the multiple revenue streams. Sometimes we get so busy when things are good. I think that's where a lot of people have been with their business the last few years. Everybody's just overbooked and
Mm-hmm.
working on the weekend and, has no time to do R&D. But now what people have been saying is they've been given the gift of time because they're not driving around or traveling as much. And what has really saved some of these businesses is these sidelights. One example, Joey Healy is an eyebrow stylist in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and he started the business going to apartments on the Upper East Side, and he would do this sort of high-end brow styling before the whole trend really caught on with eyelashes and brows. And then he realized that wasn't very efficient to be sort of walking around New York. So he rented a small place and the business was all him. Then he trained some other people in the method and they were contractors to him. And along the way, he developed an eyebrow makeup, outsourcing the manufacture to a private label company. And it wasn't a very big part of the business, but he always had it. And so during the pandemic, suddenly he had to shut his business down. In New York, he's like a level 4, not a level 2. So even with the hair salons opening, he can't open.
Right.
So he said he went down and he has a very clean basement where he stores the cosmetics. And he went down there and he had quite a big inventory. And he said, this is what the business is going to be. This is going to be my job during the pandemic, is selling this. He kept his publicist on retainer,
Mm-hmm.
and she has been getting him a lot of interviews about how to do your brows yourself at home
Yeah.
during the pandemic.
Oh.
He's been in all kinds of major magazines. I think he said he was on Good Morning America.
Yeah.
And so that has been selling really well, even though the place is closed.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that he's been doing is he created a personal styling service where people send pictures of their eyebrows to him,
Mm-hmm.
and then he gives them a 1-hour consultation for a charge. And in the eyebrow world, I discovered this when he joined my Instagram. He's quite a celebrity of the world of eyebrows, and I should go see him as I'm talking about this.
I was like, yeah, I think I can use some help.
He has a big following, so it's kind of like talking with a celebrity about your personal set of eyebrows, right? And so it's kind of a novelty and fun. And so that's how he's been keeping the business going. Now, is it at the same level that it's been at when he could open the store? No, it's not. But he's being resilient. And now what's probably going to happen, my guess, as somebody who's interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs, is once this gets going and the cosmetics are selling even more, why would he cut back on that, right? Then he has this other thing. And the consultations, who knows if he's going to want to keep doing that once the store is open. But he has that option now, and it's something that he could potentially scale to something bigger, like a live event or that sort of thing. Another person whose business was hit very hard I wrote about her for Forbes. Elisa Shiro, I met her after I wrote the book. She's an event planner who does live events.
Yeah.
And everything dried up overnight.
Yeah.
So the first thing she did was make sure all of her existing clients were well taken care of, looked at all their contracts, made sure that if they had to cancel, that was all taken care of, to maintain all the good business relationships. But then she thought, well, they're all taking their meetings onto Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I make them, I'm sorry, my stomach is rumbling because it's lunchtime. So hopefully that didn't pick up. But
Authentic, yeah.
anyhow, she started having engaging celebrities who were home during the pandemic too, to appear on the quarterly boring corporate Zoom call meetings that everybody was having,
Mm-hmm.
and really liven them up. And now she's graduated into doing experiences like having a celebrity chef entertain a corporate group. And she's getting really creative with all these different ideas. And she's so busy. She did like 4 of them in one day, the other day when I talked to her.
Wow, it's
And it was
exhausting.
something, she felt like it was a long overdue thing to learn how to do virtual meetings. And
Mm-hmm.
now this was an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting that entrepreneurs, and you don't need entrepreneur as part of your title or part of your LinkedIn profile, but if you could see through certain opportunities, or at least just give them a shot. I interviewed a gentleman very recently. You know, Jeffrey said something along the same line. Jeffrey Madoff said, you know, entrepreneurs, it's not about, oh, why do these people get so lucky? Why do they all of a sudden encounter all these opportunities? Is because they're really good at observing and identifying these opportunities and take advantage of them. So definitely, you know, I welcome you to maybe, you know, give some tips and advice to, in general, through conversations you've had on what can people do. We're talking about people maybe with full-time jobs, people who may be parents who are living with their kids in the house all the time now. How do they find time, or how do they find another way to pivot, you know, to really build these multiple streams of income, even if it's just like a second or a third income on top of their full-time job? Like, how can they even think about these things?
Well, okay, that's a really good question. A lot of it goes back to commitment, right? Like if you say I'm going to work out, but you don't make time for it, you'll never do it. So you have to really schedule time into your calendar. That's what I see people doing. They may not spend the whole day on something, but even if say you spent 30 minutes
Mm-hmm.
twice a week working on a business idea, and you worked in the same focused way you would do it at a job, you'll
Right.
get a lot done at the end of the year if you put 52 hours into any business.
That's
You're
right.
like, you know, today I'm going to start putting up the website, or I'm going to build out a LinkedIn page for this business, or I'm going to research this, or I'm going to make this phone call. You can get a lot done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you do have to put it into your calendar. I think it helps have an accountability partner too, because a lot of us in our daily lives, I'm exposed to a lot of entrepreneurs, and you are too, but not particularly in my circle of friends. It's more people who become friends through my work.
Right, right, right.
People that I know in my town, or, you know, at my yoga studio or whatever, they may not be entrepreneurs. So you need to try to find some people. Maybe, I guess everything is virtual now, so maybe an online meetup, or there's a lot of online communities for entrepreneurs. You need to be around people like that who kind of get this whole crazy thing that we're doing, which is making something out of nothing,
Right, right.
like creating value. And who like experimenting and being creative, so you don't feel so isolated doing something that other people might consider very high risk. I'm always amazed because I'm surrounded by so many people that think entrepreneurship is good. When I run across someone who's like, wow, that's so risky, I'm like,
What?
I guess it is. I don't, you know.
Not doing something is risky, isn't it? I think, to me, not doing something, not taking that step, staying behind that's really risky.
Well, I also think corporate jobs are pretty risky too, right? I mean, the whole economy is kind of shaky to begin with. And then with all the stuff that goes on in corporate America, you know, just, for instance, age discrimination, just one that affects a lot of people, right? It's not something you can really do for a lifetime in many fields. Like try being a, you know, 50-year-old in tech.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and see how that is. I mean, it's not a long-term career path. So if you're in a job and you're like, you know what, this has been a great run, I actually like working in corporate, but maybe it's not going to work out for the long term, now would be a really good time to use some of the spare time you're not commuting,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about, well, what would I like to do?
Yeah.
And experimenting, maybe sell one small product on Amazon, or it
Mm-hmm.
depends on what your areas of interest are. Also talking to people in that field. Now, if you're shy, because I always think a lot of people who are good entrepreneurs are actually introverts.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a myth that they're all these like
Like
crazy Eddie,
extroverts.
extrovert. Um, they're all different personalities. You could listen to podcasts with entrepreneurs. There are so many good ones, and just hear the voices of entrepreneurs and hear what their challenges are and how they're solving things, because there's no cookie cutter. Sometimes when people buy the book, they're like, I want the 5 easy steps to starting a business. And
Right.
there's no 5 easy steps. It's different for each person,
Mm-hmm.
because you
Mm-hmm.
bring different resources to the table, different past work experiences, different capabilities, a different personality, different lifestyle preferences. So you got to figure it out for yourself, but
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of pick up the way that entrepreneurs think by being around them, and kind of break out of some of the ways you learn in school and corporate America, which can be very non-entrepreneurial
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and more geared towards supporting these big systems, and conforming to big systems that are designed to be scalable, which have their place and create a lot of jobs. But in terms of personal expression and acting on your own ideas, they're not always the best place to do it.
Right. I'm so glad you brought up this previous job experience, your employers. It's very true that we all have to look inside ourselves and look at not just our resume, but actually sit down and write things out on, this is what we did, this is what we were good at. And you can look at the testimonials. I even personally collect some of the emails from my previous jobs, in particular on when people commented on, oh, this project went so well because, or you helped me out with this, you said this was really helpful. So when I look at my career in 12 years as a project manager, I don't just see myself as a completely disposable project manager. And that's step one. And a lot of people say, yes, you can still, as a freelancer, when you leave your corporate job, you can get hired by your employer. But I challenge people to say, well, there's so much more. You can now approach companies you always want to work with as a freelancer consultant and beyond that. And people say that dries up too. That's true, but this is where content creation becomes super powerful, that you can give your own word of advice. You can write about project management, or for me, to talk about Zoom. I never in a million years thought my Zoom videos will take off on YouTube. Never ever, because I thought it was so silly to introduce the basics. But then I found my niche of talking to fitness entrepreneurs to use Zoom for dance and fitness instructions, which is totally not what it was designed for, with lots of glitches and issues. And together as a community, we've been tackling that, and the subscribers just keep on growing and all that jazz. And what people don't realize is now you're talking about it. People want to hire you. People reach out to me to say, I know it's not free to talk to you. How much do you charge? And I'm thinking about the pandemic. I need a discount. People are like, I don't care. I need this solved. If my time is worth so much more, show me. And there are people even telling me that it took them weeks of trying to figure this out on their own. It took, a 20-minute phone call with me to solve for it. They're like, oh, why did I do this? So
I know.
it's fascinating, Elaine. I was so excited to talk to you about this because I was like, this YouTube thing's happening all at once to me while I'm reading the book. And product companies trying to partner with me. A lot of companies reach out trying to sponsor the videos, including the ones I'm actually using, like Restream. I'm so beyond excitement. So thanks to you and all the entrepreneurs I was able to really learn from.
Oh, that is so great to hear. And you're doing something, Faye, that is really critical to building a six-figure business and beyond, which is really paying attention to where the needs are, right? When you're solving somebody's problem in
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes that
Yeah,
they've been spending weeks of agony on,
yeah, yeah.
that's incredibly valuable. But that took some thinking on your part, as to what you should offer as a service that would actually help people. And there are a lot of new opportunities right now in the pandemic. There's so many. I mean, if you just go through a mental inventory of what you yourself are experiencing, like in my own house, I have 4 children ages 10 through 16 who have been
Wow.
in online school, right? While my husband and I are both working full time in the house. They're not little children. My heart goes out to people who have very small children who are working from home and they can't bring a babysitter in.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really stressful. So like just thinking about that alone, there's probably 50 business opportunities in solving all those problems. One of the entrepreneurs in the book, Rachel Charlupski, runs
Mhm.
something called the Babysitting Company. And the main thing it does is provide babysitting at sports events. Like if the Yankees play, like to the families of the Yankees,
Mhm.
maybe the wife of one of the players wants to watch the game. So the kids have this high-end childcare on site. She also does it at hotels. Well,
Yeah.
now people weren't really using their babysitters.
Mhm.
So she had this kind of pandemic program where the families that wanted to have a nanny had to commit to 20 hours a week so that nannies weren't going in and out of people's houses and infecting
Right.
people. And then she added virtual babysitting. So, like, say I had to be on a Zoom call and I have a 2-year-old,
Yeah.
they could actually be in the background, and the baby
Wow.
would be like maybe bringing toy food to the person on the other side of the screen or singing a song or something like that. And it was for 45 minutes. So it's not like all day stuff. And now she's rolling out corporate childcare because I noticed today I was actually late for something because for the first time there was traffic because some of the companies around here opened.
Yeah.
And I've been so used to having no traffic in New Jersey, which is very unusual historically. But think about that. They're
Mhm.
bringing people back who don't have babysitters. And so a lot of companies are going to need on-site childcare. So she really thought very hard about where are the pain points and where can she address them? Because, I mean, she could start doing, try to do virtual events like Elisa Shearer, but that's not her thing.
Mhm.
She's not an event planner. So you want to think in terms of your sphere of influence, like where can you bring the goods that will really help people out?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that reminds me of like these people thinking so creatively. My friend and client Steven Shapiro says, not just think outside the box, but find a better box. And he uses the metaphor to I think really trying to think through. There are people who say I'm a platform speaker. This is what I do. And I trust me, I get it. I love Zumba. I love dance. It's not the same dancing to Zoom. But for my own health reasons, I love experimenting and I bring my mind to as if I'm with my instructor. I imagine all of that and it's necessary. But some people just say that I won't do this. I'm not going to join in. This is not for me. So I think Carol Dweck says like sort of that's the kind of a very fixed mindset versus the growth mindset,
Yes.
and then being in the community really helps. And I think what your book is really very 360. It's not just about do this will work, but you also have to surround yourself with a community of people who are like-minded thinkers who unfortunately may not be family and friends to say you should get married, you should keep your full-time job, you should like keep your
It's so
six
true.
figure income,
Yeah.
right?
You
And
have
like
your
there are
best
other people.
interests at heart. But yeah, what I always encourage people who are in that situation to do, by the way, is
Mhm.
don't alienate them. You be an ambassador for entrepreneurship, right? Because they probably haven't been educated about it.
Right.
And that's why they're afraid you're doing it. But if they see you consistently chipping away at it and you're
Yeah.
serious, it's amazing how persuasive that is when you do something and it starts bringing results. All of a sudden they realize there is something to it and they'll
Mhm.
become more supportive. It's if you just talk about an idea and never do it, then you kind of lose support. So that's why what you were talking about, Faye, of finding a way to do it in whatever crazy schedule you have, because everybody has so many demands on their time today. In a way, we're more busy than ever. I mean, some days I'm on so many Zoom calls
Yeah.
between my work, my kids' karate lesson on Zoom, and everything else. Like you have to remember, you're like, oh my goodness, it's even more overwhelming than it ever has been.
Yeah.
But you can still plan ahead if you really look at your week schedule. There are pockets of time
Mhm.
where you can chip away and maybe some of that time is spent on community,
Mhm.
or maybe you find, if you're going for more walks and things like that because your gym is closed, like maybe that's a time you can listen to audible books or
Right.
podcasts. I do that a lot. There's a an entrepreneur named Denise Duffield Thomas, who she's from Australia. She's very funny. Her book is called Get Rich Lucky, I don't want to bitch. I don't know if I could say it on a podcast. So anyway,
No worries.
so she's so funny. And sometimes when I've had bad periods, like where I'm like stuck on something in my business, on my walk, I'll listen to her podcast, and it kind of gets me into a lighter frame of mind about business. And I'm like, it's all right if I don't solve this today.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find anybody, it doesn't have to be her, who motivates you,
Mm-hmm.
that can really help a lot and just take you out of your own head, because we're talking about one person businesses, right? You might be alone a lot of the time, even if your family's in the house right now, they're doing their thing,
Right.
kind of alone with the business.
Exactly. And, you know, you mentioned kind of the spaces that you're in, the conversations you choose to have. And one area you brought up earlier on, I was like, how do I integrate this? Which is a kind of, you know, not as lighthearted is the current, you know, racial justice, injustice situations that we're in. And you've taken that responsibility and you've decided to spend more time incorporating and updating your content to make it more relevant and to speak to that audience. Could you maybe share some of the insights with us at this part of
Well,
the podcast?
well, I'm still updating it, actually, because this just happened. Like at the time we're recording this, it was only like the last 2 to 3 weeks. So what happened was, with COVID, I went back and went to many of the entrepreneurs to see how they have revised their business. And now I've been going back to the entrepreneurs again to see how they're updating their business to reflect all the news that's coming. So there will be more on that. One of the things about my book is it's kind of a living book. So a lot of times I report on things on Forbes or for other places that I incorporate into the thinking of the book. Or I have a new book coming out too called Tiny Business, Big Money
Mhm.
for W.W. Norton. That's going to come out in 2022, that looks at businesses that next stage that have like an admin, or a little bit bigger than the one person business.
Mhm.
And one of the interesting things that I wrote about recently, Ramon Ray, who you might know from entrepreneurship circles, he runs the Smart Hustle conferences. When everything started happening in the news, he did
Mhm.
a very heartfelt video. He's a Black man, and he talked about his life experiences. And then he started the Black Education Fund, which funds entrepreneurship education and personal finance
Mhm.
education for the Black community. And so I wrote about that, and what he's doing. It's very innovative. He's every 30 days, he's changing the charity that it benefits, and he's using Facebook fundraisers.
Wow.
For people that want to do a fundraiser, I thought it was very valuable information. It basically, people donate directly to the charity
Mhm.
through his Facebook page. So he promotes it and uses his influencership to spread the word, but then he doesn't have to be organized as a nonprofit, which are all the things that would be a roadblock to somebody getting organized, that could take weeks, when this is an urgent, immediate problem, and
Mhm.
he wanted to act quickly. So I found that very interesting, and there will be more to come. But I just actually just started that. We were chatting about it before the show, and it's a very important time, I think, for everybody to be really thinking about, what is my branding,
Mhm.
what is my outreach, um, how do I bring more diversity and inclusion even into my one person business? Because we think of that as a corporate goal, but everybody can. We all use contractors
Mhm.
and outsource services, and there's always opportunities. So it's going to be a pretty exciting time, I think,
Mhm.
based on what I'm hearing in the entrepreneurial community.
For sure. And I'm so glad that you're able to talk to even more people, incorporating their stories. And that is so powerful that's why I love the forum and the format of podcasting, that I don't need to, and I certainly don't have all the answers to everything. And, you know, this is my specialty, but I can talk to other people, whether it's in medicine or something completely unrelated to what I'm doing, and see how they kind of shine through their ideas that they've been working on, like you said, chipping away little by little. And I love that you're putting, you know, people of color and just people who are doing amazing things for the Black community, and then just to kind of help them thrive. And I definitely have been thinking a lot about my work and who I work with, and, you know, creatively how we can kind of level up and help each other, you know, stand out more. So,
Well, one thing,
right.
Faye, that I think is kind of interesting that people don't always know,
Hmm.
the women and people of color are overrepresented statistically among one-person businesses, according to the Fed. They call it non-employer businesses, but that's basically a one person, maybe it's a partnership. And so one of the simplest ways to help is really to do more business with non-employer firms. Like if you can hire a freelancer, you're really helping those communities. And we also find that older people and people with disabilities are more heavily represented. So you're really helping a lot of people who have been discriminated against in the traditional workplace.
Right.
I'm trying to raise awareness of this because I feel like if we gave the same kind of support and nurturing as you know, in the whole business world, as say you have somebody who goes out and raises capital in Silicon Valley, right? Their business maybe doesn't have all the formal structures in place yet because they don't know. Maybe nobody they know is an entrepreneur. The VC fund is going to whip that business into shape pretty quickly and help them put the bookkeeping in place and help them put all the processes that they can grow and scale and make sure they have enough funding in their bank account. Those things are really not done for the one-person business. But imagine if they were, because I'm seeing with this book, some of them turned into scale-ups or startups at least that have the potential to scale up just on the owner's resources.
Right, exactly.
More of them could probably do it, I think, if they had the right access to capital, they had the right banking relationships, they had the right support system, because a lot of those things are sort of secondary in people's minds as a business. But we saw with the COVID crisis, right? Who got the funding? Well, it was the bigger businesses, but among the smaller ones, because I reported on this quite a bit, ones that had all their books in order, right? Because how are they going to know how much you really make if you're not using a business bank account, right? You're mixing your personal and business money together, which a lot of people do because they're just starting out and they don't have the money to set up everything separately at first. But, you know, the people who have a business credit card, that have built business credit, that have a business banking relationship, had an edge. And I thought one of the most important things that could be done right now is to help more of the non-employer businesses formalize themselves a little bit. Even if, like, I'm a creative, I don't like doing my bookkeeping. I hire Bench to do my bookkeeping because I just won't get to it. I'm always behind on it, et cetera. But if we could get more support to the businesses that need it, a lot of them have tremendous potential and they could do just as well as the businesses that get nurtured in Silicon Valley without having to go the VC route, because they might not be that type of business. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot. And, you know, I really invite anybody to contact me if they have ideas on that, because I think that could be very important in terms of bringing money to people that can have a lot of influence. I mean, in terms of income, allowing those business owners to really give back to the community. And you're just on so many fronts and so ignored right now, even the non-employer business. I am a geek about this subject, as you know, from the book.
No, I think it's a good point for businesses to hear about it, banks or otherwise. But I also think that because I was in that very situation years ago to help my mom set up her business in the US, and then it became very urgent that I needed to set up my business as of, you know, January 1st, 2016. And the work started, of course, in late 2015. And I was very lucky because I'm connected to, you know, lawyers and accountants that I had access to on the call, literally one phone call, I think, with just a few minutes. My friend Vaughn Lee said, go to this website, the Form 5, I just like scribbling away. And then I put that article together. It's called How to Set Up Your LLC, Set Up Your Company in 3 Simple Steps. And that became the most read article on my website because people assumed that you need to spend a lot of money, a lot of time, make a ton of mistakes, and all this hassle and not have your own company. But actually, if you just follow the same few steps, but I agree with you, that doesn't answer the issue that you raised, because there's also other considerations, right? Accounting. But I think from my point of view, there's something that I could do to say, this is how you get started. And I think what you're talking about is like, okay, after you reach a certain point, you know, how you scale. Like now you need, you know, the bigger support, that maybe the even more professional setup to understand how you scale from there.
And also build sustainability, right? Because if you, like the people that I know that were really struggling and didn't get PPP funding and didn't get the EIDL, I mean, we're in very uncertain times right now. So what I have learned from working with a lot of middle market companies, I'm a ghostwriter also, is all of the leaders of those companies are saying the same thing. you need cash in your bank account right now.
Yeah.
Cash gives you an ability to maneuver. So even if you're a one-person business, you need cash.
Mm-hmm.
And the SBA loans are less than 4% interest.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot of money to just have the assurance that if there's some weird blip on the radar screen that we can't predict, that you'll have money in the bank and you're not operating from a mindset of scarcity and panic, and you can ride it out. You can always not use the money and pay it back, but that's how they think. And so I feel like just in my own business, I've tried to apply that to my business. And I see a lot of these entrepreneurs thinking that way. Like Joey Healy, the eyebrow stylist, one of the first things he did in March, he said, was he had existing overhead that didn't go away yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did a sale. It was like a 15% discount, but he raised a lot of cash that way
Mm-hmm.
for the business. That gave him a little more maneuverability to get through the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you can do to formalize and show how much money the business really makes. It's also good for the entrepreneur, because those of us who are creatives, sometimes like if you ask me how much money my business made last month, I would have to look it up right now because I've been busy with other things. You know, we tend to get caught up in the project. But if you have someone in the background who's always keeping it up to date, my books are up to date. I have a bookkeeper who does them every month.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can just look it up and kind of realign and say, okay, wait a minute, it's down a little bit because of COVID, but I have these dormant projects. Maybe I can step on the gas with them, or maybe I need to do a little more social media or do more networking or whatever it is, but to keep your revenue at a certain level so you can navigate whatever is ahead and take advantage of opportunities too. That's the other side of it. It's like with no money in your bank account, you could do things on a shoestring, but you need a little bit of money to do.
Yeah, exactly. That part of education and the constant that discipline you set to monitoring how you're doing as a business cannot be overlooked. And I never used to do this, but when I worked full time, but now I block out, basically a couple of hours on either Saturday or Sunday every week to look at, to kind of rebalance, not just my checking account, but also just how my business is doing. Am I lining up the right phone call? So you really need that space to think things through. And there are weeks where things are going really well. The whole exercise could take 15 minutes, but to know that that's something that you should do is really important. Like you said, if there's help, if there are people you can trust, and understand that structure and properly train to work with entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, and even more power to us. I feel like, yeah, that part is definitely lacking. There's the small, the basically all focused targeted at large, small business here. When people say small business, like 10 to 100 million, and medium and large size business, but the solopreneur landscape can be looked at definitely and be helped and served.
Yeah, there's a lot more that can be done. Some of the businesses use the small business development centers to do some of this stuff. Another group that does a lot of help with this is the Urban League. They actually operate some small business development centers. So it depends on where you live, but there are a lot of free resources to help you formalize. And it's stuff that we do find boring sometimes, but it's so important if you really want the business to be a way that you make a living, to do all this stuff right. And I see a lot of these entrepreneurs, they're very smart about, is it an LLC? Is it an LLC that pays taxes as an S corp? Or, they take the time to learn this stuff so that they can keep on living whatever their dream happens to be.
Yeah, I love this so much. And thank you so much, Elaine. I know I took more time than booked. And
This was fun. I could talk to you all day, Faye.
this is
This
so
was a lot of
cool.
fun.
We're talking for the first time, and this is like so liberating that I'm meeting people on Zoom forever for the first time, and we're having these conversations and learning from one another. And to talk to an expert like yourself, a gentleman from earlier, Ian Gray. I mean, the hourly rate, okay guys, like hundreds of dollars, and yet I'm able to learn and directly from you by sharing our platforms and as preparing, asking for the questions. So I'm very privileged, and thank you for sharing this as a live stream and for this to be available on Feisworld podcast as well. I'm very excited.
Thank you so much, Faye. I've learned a lot from you too. So we'll have to continue this conversation. Maybe a future interview of you by me is in store.
Oh, I'm open book. I love it. I'm so appreciative. Like back in 2017, Dory Clark put me in her book called Entrepreneurial You, changed my life, changed my mindset. So anything I can be of resource and assistance, please let me know.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, I will definitely take you up on that.